4 months after my car accident, I was still unable to stand. Even a simple task like getting a book from the shelf meant I had to ask Sarah for help. In the future, she was imagining, I was becoming a burden that she would have to support for the rest of her life. Because of that, she started doing everything she could to make me be the one to end our relationship. I was walking quickly to move my car when I went past a group of people. Then I heard Sarah call my name. "Alex?" Her voice sounded completely surprised. I stopped and turned to look at her. We hadn't seen each other in several years. I never expected her to find out I had recovered in this way. She walked toward me through the crowd, looking first at my face and then down at my legs. She seemed to be checking if what she was seeing was real. I knew what she was looking for, so I spoke first. "Do you want me to walk a few steps for you?" Only then did the surprise in her eyes turn into a shocked voice. She said, "Alex, you can stand again? That's a medical miracle." It seemed like she had never imagined I would one day be on my own 2 feet again. It was just like it was back then. Even though the doctor had clearly said my injuries weren't that bad and would heal if I stuck with long-term physical therapy. Even though I was doing all the treatments the doctor prescribed. 3 months after my injury, just because I couldn't even pull myself up using my wheelchair, she had decided I would be stuck in it for the rest of my life. I had never seen that side of Sarah before. She sat next to me with a look of total hopelessness, muttering to herself, "How could this happen? How is there no progress after 3 months?" That was the first moment I understood that my existence had become a weight she couldn't stand to carry. I repeated her words back to her. "A medical miracle?" Then I laughed at her assessment. All I did was listen to my doctor's instructions, stick with the treatment, and prove her negative assumption was wrong. And she called it a medical miracle. It was funny. After all, when I stood in front of my doctor again, even he just said, "Congratulations on your recovery," not, "This is a medical miracle." When I got back from moving my car, Sarah was still standing there, staring in the direction I had gone. I asked her what she was doing. She pointed at my empty hands. "You didn't have your bag with you, so I knew you were coming back." After the crowd thinned out, I noticed that the man she had told me about back then wasn't with her. I asked her, "Is your boyfriend not with you?" She told me, "I'm single." All these years apart, I thought she would have found that man to make up for her past regrets. I didn't expect her to still be alone. During the 4th month Sarah was taking care of me, I still needed her help for simple things, like getting a book to look something up. One day, after I'd asked her to grab book after book for me, she suddenly leaned against the shelf and started talking about the past. She asked me, "Alex, did you know? I once turned down a guy who confessed his feelings for me." It was something she felt was worth mentioning now, but had never brought up back when it happened, when she could have used it to show her loyalty to me. To bring it up so suddenly, at a time like this, I could guess why. Sarah was still upset that I was causing her so much trouble. Although I didn't know who this man was, I knew one thing for sure. He was able-bodied. Years later, Sarah was starting to regret it. If she had left me and gotten together with that man, she wouldn't be in this situation. I tried to stand up to prove to her that the treatment was starting to work, but the pain was too much, and I collapsed back into the wheelchair. Sarah rushed over to help me up, scolding me for pushing myself. The words came tumbling out of her mouth. "Alex, don't you know what condition you're in?" She never held out any hope for me. Even when I told her, "Sarah, I'm going to get better," she would just try to quiet me with a dismissive, yeah, I'm sure you will." My best friend, Ben, came out and called for me to hurry back inside for dinner. Sarah stopped me. She took out her phone, dialed my number, and told me it was her new one. She said to call her any time if I needed anything. As I walked inside with Ben, I blocked Sarah's new number. Ben saw what I was doing and asked me, "Alex, you're not planning on getting back together with Sarah? From the way she was looking at you, it seems like she still has feelings for you." Ben didn't know what our daily life together had been like, much less the real reason we broke up. He probably just heard that I was the one who ended it, and assumed Sarah was the one who got dumped. He never stopped to think about why Sarah had changed her number in the first place. It was her way of cutting off all contact with me after she left. Sarah couldn't handle the thought of taking care of a paralyzed me for the rest of her life. Her sadness and hesitation weren't about love. She just didn't want to carry the stigma of abandoning me when I was paralyzed, to be judged and pitied by others for the rest of her life. I broke up with Sarah the same afternoon she told me about that other man. I didn't cry or make a scene. I didn't even ask a single question about him. I just sat there quietly, turning the pages of a book and typing notes into my computer. I didn't give Sarah the reaction she was looking for. She stood in the study for a long time. So long that when her phone suddenly rang, she said she had to go out and rushed off. But I saw it clear as day. She typed on her phone for a bit, and 10 minutes later, that call came in. I sat at my desk in a daze, suddenly wondering what the last 5 years of our relationship even meant. The love between us couldn't withstand one car accident, and Sarah's imagined future of me dragging her down for a lifetime. I bent over to pick up a book that had fallen and accidentally fell to the floor. The pain in my legs was terrible. I gripped the edge of the desk, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get back into my wheelchair. I found my phone and called Sarah twice, but she never picked up. I figured she probably knew that if I was calling, it was because I needed her for something. I didn't call a third time. I just lay there on the floor, waiting for the pain in my legs to fade, waiting until I had enough strength to try and get back up on my own. It wasn't easy, but after half an hour I was back in my wheelchair, drenched in sweat. But I had done it. Then I wheeled myself to the living room, found the first aid kit, and cleaned the scrapes on my legs. I straightened my rumpled clothes and waited in the living room for Sarah all afternoon. By the time Sarah got back, I had already found a caretaker online. Mr. Harrison was the best rated, and he could start tomorrow. I paid extra, and he promised to come that same evening. Sarah clearly enjoyed her time out. The resentment on her face had lessened when she returned. She poured me a glass of water and handed it to me. I first said thank you, and then I broke up with her. It wasn't completely out of the blue. Sarah thought her story about the other man had worked. Her eyes were fixed on me, as if she hadn't quite heard what I'd said. I pointed to her things, which I'd placed by the door. "Sarah, you should go." The breakup I initiated was the answer she had been scheming to get for so long. So that day, she didn't even pretend to resist. She just hurried away. I never called Sarah again after that, and I never knew she had gotten a new number. Ben didn't find out Sarah had left until a week later. He had just gotten back from a business trip and came to see me, bringing some herbal remedies. I was holding onto the edge of the desk, pulling myself to a standing position. I quickly called for Mr. Harrison to come and see. The moment Ben pushed the door open, he gasped and ran over, grabbing my shoulders tightly. He was more emotional than I was, his voice choking up. "Alex, how are you recovering so fast?" Then he started calling for Sarah, looking all around the apartment. "Sarah, come look! Alex is standing up!" After he found out Sarah and I had broken up, Ben blamed me for being too kind, for letting her go because I was afraid of being a burden. He said, "Alex, you guys were a couple. If you can't get through something small like this, how are you supposed to spend the rest of your lives together?" It was precisely because I knew I couldn't rely on Sarah that I decided not to spend the rest of my life with her. After the dinner party, I didn't go home. I went back to the office, and I finally finished a project proposal that had been giving me headaches for weeks. It's strange what motivates you. I was angry about what Sarah did, how she made me see that she wasn't someone I could depend on. So I became even more dedicated to my physical therapy, just to prove that all her so-called worries were for nothing. Even from my wheelchair, I could still pull all-nighters, typing away to create the best proposals. When I realized I couldn't rely on Sarah, money was the only thing I could. The caretaker I hired, Mr. Harrison, took great care of me. I used the money I earned to pay for my rehab. It was 6 months after the accident that I could finally stand and take a couple of steps on my own. That day, Mr. Harrison was helping me walk slowly across the living room, and I joked with him, "Mr. Harrison, if I can take 2 steps by myself, can you make me some braised short ribs tonight?" Mr. Harrison chuckled and said, "Of course." He let go of me, his hands hovering protectively nearby. The moment I took the first step, my eyes were already welling up. After the second step, Mr. Harrison rushed over to steady me. "You did so well. I'll make you a huge plate of short ribs tonight." In the 2 months since Sarah had left, I had been making constant progress. I told her I'd get better soon. She just didn't believe me. To her, getting better felt like a day that would never come. I saw Sarah outside my office building. She teased me for being a workaholic, just like she used to. Then she mentioned she'd been waiting outside my apartment for a long time, and when I didn't show up, she came here. She even pointed to the newly lit window of my office and asked, "Did you get a new office?" After Sarah left, she never once showed any concern for me. Even though she knew my address, my phone number, and where I worked, she never came by. That was the first time I felt how big this city was, big enough for Sarah to hide from me for 3 years. So she had no idea when I had recovered or when I had gotten a promotion. Tonight's meeting was a surprise to both of us. She called out for me to wait, then ran back to her car to get something. I didn't wait. I just walked after her, but I accidentally stepped on a loose stone and almost fell. Sarah froze. When she turned around, her face was pale. I think she must have remembered all those times I needed her from my wheelchair. But when she saw that I had caught my balance, she rushed over, full of concern for my leg. "Are you okay? How's the recovery going?" Perhaps that was the question she'd been wanting to ask all night. How's the recovery? Are there any lasting effects? I told her, "It aches badly when the weather's bad. I'll probably end up back in a wheelchair when I'm old." She didn't believe me, though. She smiled and said that when she saw me earlier, I was running so fast I didn't look like someone who'd been in a car accident. Then she took a gift out of her car. "Alex, congratulations on your recovery." I didn't take it. I just laughed at the situation. "Sarah, now that I'm back in one piece, am I your best option again?" Sarah reacted just like I had back then, pretending not to understand the meaning behind the words, even though she knew exactly what I meant. Just like now, she ignored my sarcastic laugh and told me with a firm expression, "Alex, you've always been exceptional. Being with you is an honor." She even felt the need to explain that in the 3 years since we broke up, she had been single. I could guess that the able-bodied man she mentioned still didn't meet her standards. I don't believe she didn't try to find a boyfriend in those 3 years. She just never found anyone suitable. And then, by sheer coincidence, 3 years later, I reappeared before her, whole again. Her condescending love for me came surging back. She always managed to show me her most selfish side. When I was perfectly healthy, I was her best option, better than any other man around. When I was broken, I was her worst option, losing out to any man who was whole. The second time I ran into Sarah was 3 days later. Just like last time, she was standing outside the restaurant, engineering another chance encounter. This time, I was with a client, and we just brushed past each other in the crowd. She didn't even get a chance to say hello. These coincidences were happening too often. It was obvious Sarah was arranging them. So obvious that her intense stare caught my colleague's attention. He leaned in and whispered to me, "Alex, is she into you? Is she into me? I don't think so. If she hadn't found out I had recovered, she'd probably still think that manipulating me into breaking up with her 3 years ago was the right decision. Our unexpected reunion after 3 years could have had many different endings. Instead of acknowledging me, Sarah could have pretended she didn't see me. But I just had to go and turn back into the old Alex. And just like that, Sarah was in a hurry to recognize me again. Not a single chance encounter in 3 years, but 2 in 3 days. What a joke. This time, I left with my bag. I have no idea how long Sarah might have waited there. I finished up some contract prep for the next day at the office before finally heading home. At my front door, I found a hangover remedy Sarah had left there. She had written on a sticky note, reminding me to take care of my health. With her number blocked everywhere, this was the only way she could contact me. It was just like when we used to fight. I wouldn't answer her calls or reply to her messages. I'd come home from working late and find a meal she'd prepared for me, along with an apology note. Back then, a gesture like that could easily win my forgiveness. But those were just fights. We were still planning to go to the park that weekend to exercise. She offered an olive branch, and I was quick to take it. This time was different. We had broken up. It was a carefully considered decision, and we had stopped talking about a future together long ago. Mr. Harrison opened the door for me, telling me I was working too hard and to come in and eat. The things Sarah brought fell to the floor. I casually picked them up, walked inside, and threw them in the trash. It was only while I was eating that Mr. Harrison mentioned Sarah had come by twice. The first time was the day we ran into each other. She waited for a long time before coming up to knock on the door. Mr. Harrison asked who she was, and she said she was a friend of mine. He didn't believe her, because in the 3 years I'd been sick, she had never once appeared. So Sarah was left standing outside the door. The second time was tonight. She came specifically to drop off the hangover remedy and told Mr. Harrison to make sure I drank it. She even said, "Drinking is bad for his health. His leg isn't good, so he'll be more trouble for you to look after." Mr. Harrison, being older and having seen more of the world, easily guessed who Sarah was. He asked her sarcastically, "Since you know his leg is bad and he needs someone to take care of him, why are you only showing up now?" Sarah stammered something about special circumstances. Mr. Harrison didn't let up. He continued his passive-aggressive attack. "You know his address and his phone number, yet you don't show up once in 3 years. I guess your legs must have gotten banged up in the accident, too." He looked down at Sarah's legs. "You got lucky, though. You can't even tell." I put down my chopsticks and pretended to be scared, laughing at how sharp Mr. Harrison's tongue was. He patted my shoulder twice and told me to hurry up and eat. "My Alex has finally learned to fly so high again. We can't let her swoop in and reap the benefits." The whole thing with Mr. Harrison calling me an eagle started after I had recovered enough to stand. I would walk all over the living room, calling him over and over to come and watch. Time and again, Mr. Harrison would stand at the kitchen doorway, clapping and laughing that I was like a young eagle just learning to fly. Mr. Harrison said it was good to be an eagle, that I would only fly higher and higher. He would worry about me working endless overtime, but then he'd praise me for being amazing whenever I brought home news of a promotion or a raise. It was only then that Ben finally realized something was off about Sarah suddenly reappearing after being absent for 3 years. He asked me, "Alex, why did you and Sarah really break up? Was it Sarah who broke up with you, and you just said you did it to save her face? Otherwise, it makes no sense that she never tried to get back with you after you broke up, and you never mentioned her name again." I wasn't going to slander Sarah. I told Ben I was the one who ended it. It's just that Sarah spent all her energy trying to get me to do it. Ben asked, confused. "Why? Because of your leg? But you were going to get better, right?" She didn't believe it. "But that's what the doctor said." She didn't believe him either. She only believed her own feelings. Those 4 months she took care of me, she lived in a fictional horror where I, as a disabled person, would be a burden on her for the rest of her life. I told Ben about how Sarah had mentioned turning down that other guy for me. Ben exploded. "What kind of bullshit is that? If you hadn't saved her back then, she wouldn't have even had the chance to turn that guy down. Alex, you should have made her repay you. You should have made her take care of you until you were fully recovered and then kicked her to the curb." The time I saved Sarah was 8 years ago. That day, Ben and I were hanging out by the river when we heard someone calling for help. I happened to be a decent swimmer, so I ran toward the voice and jumped in. It took all my strength to drag her to the shore. I started CPR on her, and it wasn't until she coughed up water that I pulled Ben away with me. Ben was panting as we walked, telling me I scared him to death 1 minute and praising me for saving a life the next. Sarah found out later that I was the one who saved her. One of her friends recognized me. She grabbed Sarah and ran to catch up to me, pointing at her and asking if I was the one who had saved her by the river a month ago. I looked up and saw the small, dark mole right in the center of her neck. I had seen that mole when I was giving her chest compressions. I even thought it was in a nice spot. Sarah was the first to extend her hand to thank me. She pointed to a nearby restaurant and invited me to sit down, saying she wanted to thank me properly. Ben thought Sarah was beautiful and did his best to set us up. "Look, even your names sound like you're destined to be together. The meal she's buying has got to be good. I want to try it. You should take me." I couldn't sleep, so I stayed in the study to look over some documents. My pen fell to the floor. As I bent over to pick it up, I was suddenly reminded of that miserable afternoon. As I lay helplessly on the floor, waiting for my strength to return, I thought to myself, just let it go. There was no need to wait for time to give Sarah the answer she wanted. I don't know what it was like for Sarah when she got the call about my accident and rushed over from her office. I just remember waking up after surgery and seeing her asleep, her head resting on the side of my bed. This girl, who was always so conscious of her appearance, was watching over me, looking haggard and exhausted. When she felt my fingers twitch, she startled awake. With red-rimmed eyes, she said, "Alex, you scared me to death." Back then, she truly loved me, didn't she? That's why, during the short time Sarah was gone, I wheeled myself to the doctor's office for a consultation. I asked him seriously, what were the chances my legs would fully recover? What were the chances I'd walk with a limp? And what were the chances I'd never stand again? The doctor told me to trust his skills and to stick with the treatment. He said it wasn't that serious. It would just take a long time to heal. The doctor tried to comfort me. Just think of it as a long vacation. I had planned to break up with Sarah if I heard bad news. I never wanted to be a burden on her for the rest of her life. But the doctor told me it wasn't that serious, so I put the thought aside. Turns out Sarah was having second thoughts of her own. My savings were more than enough to cover my medical expenses. It wasn't money that broke us. It was the day-in, day-out reality of those 4 months she spent taking care of me. My legs had taken away so many of my abilities, and I had no choice but to rely on her help. In her countless imagined futures, the fear of having to care for me crushed Sarah. Ben asked me why I never brought up the fact that I had saved her life. I think Sarah probably had to choose between that life debt and our relationship. She didn't decide to stick by me through thick and thin because I'd saved her life. Forcing the issue would have been pointless. When I went to Sarah's company to negotiate a partnership, she didn't even have a seat at the table. Through the crowd of people, I saw her pushed to a corner of the room. In the year I loved her most, I once told her that if I ever made it big, I would never forget her. And for the years we were together, I never skimped on her financially. In the year I disliked her most, I fantasized about this exact scene countless times, me looking down on her from a position of power, letting her see me standing on top and laughing at how she'd fallen behind. These past few years, I worked hard enough, and Sarah didn't progress at all. That's what made my fantasy a reality. Her eyes seemed to hold 1,000 words, but I only gave her a fleeting glance before following the group into the conference room. There was no thrill of revenge, just a sense of finally getting closure for all the indignities I had suffered. In those days when I couldn't walk, Sarah thought I saw her as my one and only savior. That's why she was afraid that the nicer she was to me, the more I would depend on her, that I would cling to her shamelessly and never let her leave. She always thought I was incapable, but she couldn't see that even then I was still working hard, desperately trying to show her that I wouldn't be a burden. It was raining when the meeting ended. I walked back to the parking garage under my umbrella. As I sat in my car, rubbing my aching leg, I saw Sarah tapping on my window. In all that time, this was the only chance she got to approach me. I lowered the window, letting her get a clear look at what I was doing. I hadn't lied to Sarah. My leg really did ache and throb when it rained. It was a side effect that would require a long, long time to manage. Didn't Sarah want to chase after me now that she saw I was perfectly fine? Well then, I'd let her see that I was still tormented by the aftermath of that accident. To show her that in her eyes, I was still no match for any other able-bodied man. But Sarah didn't seem to care. She put on a pained expression and asked, "Is it bad? Should I go to the pharmacy and get you something?" I had nothing to say to her. I just silently rubbed my leg. Sarah suddenly spoke. "Alex, I want to take care of you again." I told her, "Sarah, this ache isn't going to get better anytime soon. When it's bad, the pain keeps me up on rainy nights." She insisted, "I'll get through it with you." She always trusts her own judgment, and never my words. Last time, I said I would get better, and she didn't believe me. This time, I said the pain might be with me for life, and she didn't believe that either. Or maybe she figured that no matter how bad things got, it wouldn't be like before, when I had to rely on her for something as simple as a drink of water. I don't agree, and I don't believe you. Back when she was taking care of me, there were times she'd get fed up and pour me a glass of scalding hot water. I would carefully place the scorching glass on the coffee table and wait for it to cool down before drinking. There were also times when I'd ask her to push me onto the balcony to get some sun, and she'd deliberately position me in the glaring light. Back then, I was already trying my best to tolerate her impatient outbursts. I admit I was a hassle for her at the time. So at first, I chose to forgive these little acts of frustration. But eventually, she started dropping hints that she wanted to break up, and my tolerance proved useless. Actually, Sarah's friend Chloe came to see me after we broke up. The day she came, I was in the middle of an online meeting in my study. Mr. Harrison showed her to the living room to wait. After the meeting, I tried to pull myself up using the desk and excitedly called for Mr. Harrison to come and see. Mr. Harrison, worried I'd stand for too long, hurried over to praise me, I looked up and saw the person standing behind him. After we sat down in the living room, the first thing she said to me was, "Sarah lied to me." That's when I found out what Sarah had messaged her on the day we broke up. She had said, "Alex can't accept what happened to his leg. He's in the study acting like a madman." So when her friend called back, it was to tell her to be patient with me, to understand the trauma I was going through, and to comfort me. But the second Sarah answered that call, she told me she had to go out. That afternoon, Sarah hid at her friend's house, enjoying an afternoon free from taking care of me. When I called her, Sarah silenced the call, refusing to even hear what I needed. According to Sarah, the accident had shattered me, and she was the one spending her days consoling me and trying to lift my spirits. But in the end, her friend witnessed with her own eyes that I was busy working and trying to stand up, busy with everything except wallowing in self-pity. Sarah told her friend the same rehearsed story about our breakup. Alex said he didn't want to drag me down, so he told me to leave. Her friend scolded her, saying she shouldn't have just walked out but should have stayed, and told me it wasn't a big deal, that it wasn't like I'd never get better. Sarah had retorted, "Who told you that? Are you sure? The state he's in? It doesn't look like there's much hope. I can't bring myself to lie to him like that." So Chloe had come to convince me to pull myself together and cooperate with the doctors, telling me that being negative wouldn't help my condition. Instead, she found me doing just fine, never letting the accident get the best of me. Mr. Harrison handed me a blanket to cover my legs, then gave me a glass of warm water. Chloe watched and said, "Maybe it's a good thing Sarah left." As I was about to drive away, Sarah looked nervously at my leg and asked me, "Alex, can you drive, or should I give you a ride?" Her concern only ever appeared when she wanted something. That day, when she finally got the breakup she wanted, her only thought was to escape my apartment as fast as possible. She knew my best friend was out of town on business, and she had sworn to my parents that she would take good care of me, so she never once thought about how I would get through that night alone. It was already 9 o'clock when Mr. Harrison arrived. I was in the middle of eating some takeout. I wheeled myself over to open the door for him. The first thing he asked when he came in was, "Has no one been taking care of you until now?" I said, "No, it's just tonight that I'm on my own." The first thing Mr. Harrison did in my home was ask what foods I needed to avoid. Then he went straight into the kitchen and cooked me a proper meal. The half-eaten takeout was thrown into the trash. While straightening up my study, Mr. Harrison neatly put away all the books Sarah had left out. It was in that moment that my heart grew completely cold toward Sarah. Mr. Harrison took a few days off, so Ben came over to stay with me. He was bored and started drawing patterns with a pen on the scarred skin of my leg. He suddenly brought up the time I was unconscious in the hospital. He and Sarah had arrived at the hospital at the same time. The moment she saw me, covered in blood, Sarah collapsed to the floor. He said, "Alex, back then Sarah was genuinely terrified you were going to die. So until I woke up, Sarah never left my side. She took good care of me then, watching my every move. That's why, on the day I woke up, even though she was exhausted, she could sense my slightest movement and wake up instantly. The first thing she said to me was, 'Alex, you scared me to death.' Her expectations for me were low back then. She just wanted me to wake up. That process took 3 days. After I woke up, her next wish was for me to be safely discharged, to get away from that suffocating place. That process took a month. Then we went home and had 2 relatively peaceful months. She was strict with me then, hoping I would think less about work and focus on my recovery. Sarah wanted me to stand up again soon, but the process was unknown and long. I couldn't do it in a short amount of time, and after 4 months of caring for me, Sarah suddenly had a mental breakdown. I guess when I was forced to depend on her, I was too much like a helpless infant. She felt an unprecedented sense of suffocation and pressure. And so, I could easily pick up on all her little maneuvers to leave. When Ben came to visit, he had indeed seen Sarah taking good care of me. That's why, after telling me all this, he admitted that his initial assumption about our breakup, that I had benevolently let her go, was wrong. He now understood it was the result of Sarah's daily pressure. Now he could look at me with red-rimmed eyes, his voice filled with sympathy, and say, "Alex, I want to kill her." And he actually did drive to Sarah's place in the middle of the night. But Sarah had been so determined to cut ties with me. She didn't just change her contact information, she also moved. So Ben returned that night defeated. But he told me, with a hint of schadenfreude, that he had just seen Sarah downstairs from my apartment building. She had probably been turned away at the door enough times that she didn't bother coming up, just stood downstairs. I had no idea she was there. But it was exactly what Ben wanted. The rage he couldn't vent that night came pouring out tonight. This is how Ben told it to me. I was afraid she'd run, so in the few seconds it took to charge over, my brain was rapidly calculating the best place to hit her. He decided to kick her hard in the shin with his heavy-soled leather shoes, for no other reason than he remembered her telling me to my face that she'd rejected an able-bodied man, and he felt it was the deepest cut she could have made. In the end, he was disappointed that Sarah reacted so quickly and limped away. He said to me, "Alex, I hate it. Back at the hospital, I really thought that after you got better, you should spend your life repaying Sarah for her care." Sarah had been good to me, it's true. She was just too afraid I would drag her down in the future. So in the future, she planned for herself. I was the burden that had to be abandoned. A week later, I saw a limping Sarah. She was standing outside a shop I often visit. I looked up when I heard some people talking about the woman outside. Even now, Sarah's looks and figure were still striking enough to instantly draw people's attention. But that wasn't why I fell for her back then. At that time, Sarah was genuinely grateful that I had saved her life. So after our first meal, she asked me out for a second. This time, it was just the two of us, and she ordered all my favorite dishes. No one had told her my preferences. She had learned them all just by carefully observing me during our first meal. She even pulled a handful of plum-flavored candies from her pocket. She said, "I saw you ate quite a few last time, so I brought some for you." It was then that I thought she was a good person. At least she was thoughtful and attentive. I figured if we got together, she would probably treat me well. Kids these days are all about making the first move. So I watched as the two guys who had been talking about Sarah went outside to ask for her number. Sarah waved her hands and backed away. Ben must have kicked her pretty hard because her retreat looked a little clumsy. I even heard the two guys come back in and start talking about her leg. It's a shame. She's got a limp. I imagine Sarah must have, at some point, thought about what people would say if she brought me home in my condition. What a shame she found a boyfriend like that. And so she became even more afraid. For the first time, I heard an apology from Sarah's lips for what she did to me 3 years ago. This sudden apology was nothing more than her finally feeling a fraction of the hardship I had endured. For the past week, she had been trying to do so many things on that injured leg. It wasn't until she realized she couldn't even run or jump before her leg healed that she finally understood. That my serious injuries also needed time to recover. It wasn't that I would be standing again in no time, as she had imagined. She took one kick, and a week later her walking was still affected. To be annoyed that I couldn't even stand up after 3 months was indeed asking the impossible. She said she had been too impatient back then. But it was in her impatience that I saw her selfish nature. In the end, the doctor never gave her a specific recovery timeline. Calculated in months, she had lasted 4. Calculated in years, she couldn't even begin to imagine it. She didn't know how long it would be after I stood up before I could walk. And after I could walk, how long before I could run and jump freely. To ask her to spend a long, indefinite amount of time with me, betting on an unknown outcome. She must have calculated it in her head over and over, trying to figure out which choice was most beneficial to her. That amount of time was enough for her to find someone else who had climbed to the same heights as me, and that person wouldn't be in a wheelchair. So, the most urgent thing for her back then was to cut her losses with me. When Sarah revealed she wanted to get back together as a way of making it up to me, I took on the role she had played back then. I looked at her legs with a critical eye. Sarah, I could probably pull a random person off the street who's better off than you right now. What can you do? You don't make as much as me. Your leg is busted. And as for your ability to care for someone, I saw enough of that 3 years ago. Choosing you would be a loss for me. I had never bickered with Sarah about things like money. So when I said all this to her, she watched in agony as I acted out the hypocritical role she had played all those years ago. I never felt like Sarah owed me anything. I never even brought up the fact that I had saved her life. I just figured since she suggested we give it a try, and I had a good impression of her, why not? But once we were in a relationship, we had responsibilities to each other. I thought that responsibility meant sharing the good times and the bad. I never thought it meant we'd fly off in separate directions when disaster struck. I told her about the person she described to her friend. Irritable, angry, unable to accept reality. That wasn't me. That was you. Just like now, her face was twisted in pain and regret, but only because she failed to trust my words, failed to persevere. And now she's missed out on sharing my moment of triumph. After all, the higher I fly, the less qualified Sarah becomes to even stand before me. Before I left, I chose to twist the knife one last time. Do you know when I was able to stand up? A week after you left, just 1 week. If she had stayed, we might have made it from 3 years ago to today. I went to a wedding. The officiant recited the same old lines, then asked the same old question. Do you take this woman to be your wife, to have and to hold, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do you part? This was the first time I had ever truly listened to that question. I used to think it was dry and boring, just a formulaic part of the ceremony. But now I realized it truly tells us what marriage means. It means that where there is health, there will be sickness. Where there is wealth, there will be poverty. Where there is laughter, there will be tears. Every time we say, I like you, I love you, and finally, I do, it means we have decided to face all the possibilities that may arise in this relationship together. And what keeps that relationship going is our commitment to face difficulties together, to accept the changes as they come. It's not, I only want you when you're healthy, when you're rich, when you're happy. For those 2 months that Sarah did take good care of me, I was genuinely grateful for her efforts. So during the time I was working from home, I was planning to save up a large sum of money to give to her as a gift. But the goal I set was too high, and the time Sarah gave me was too short. I didn't reach my goal before she left. 6 months after she left, on the day I finally hit that target, I invested that money in myself. In that moment, I was grateful that I hadn't given up on myself.